And now, the Rink Rap podcast from Forever Blueshirts, talking all things New York Rangers hockey. Here's your host, Jim Cerny.
What's up, Blueshirts faithful? I'm Jim Cerny. Welcome to the Rink Rap podcast. Welcome to the month of July. Welcome to the heat. Oh, the summer heat is cranking right now. And you would have laughed if there was, if I was one of those TikTokers, that film every single moment of their lives and put it out there on social media. You would have been laughing pretty good on July 1st, right? Just 24 hours ago. I was upstairs in my office here at my house, and there's no air conditioning in my office. I was sweating my ass off. It would have been hot anyway, but I've got 3 screens going. I'm on the phone, making calls. What's going on? Trying to get the lowdown. What are the Rangers doing? And after they made moves, talk to people I know in the business, getting their opinions and takes and all that. I'm writing stories like it's going crazy. I'm playing air traffic controller, if you will, for the Forever Blueshirts website of having the staff. Our great intern Ryan is cranking out all these great graphics. I'm like, you gotta get this. We need that. Hey, you write this story. I'm gonna edit this. I'm gonna write that story. I mean, it was going nuts. But I stood up at some point. I've been sitting probably for hours at one point when it really got crazy. And I realized, oh my gosh, I am soaked. I'm just sweating like a madman up in my office because all hell's breaking loose with the Rangers. And you don't realize how many hours have gone by and how many stories you've posted and things on social media and, everything that we do, right? So it's a long way of saying I was a hot mess on Wednesday. So that is why I did not do an instant reaction show for everything that went on with the New York Rangers. I decided, you know what? I finished writing the last story that I posted. My first one that I posted on Wednesday was 8 a.m. The last one I posted was 10 p.m. or thereabouts, 9:45 p.m. Right? Just a big analysis piece at the end of the day. And it was pretty hot and heavy, hot being the operative word, right? Hot and heavy, the entire day. So, there was no podcast. It wasn't pretty. I'm not pretty anyway, but it really wouldn't have been pretty if we turned on the camera yesterday. Just the sweat and everything. But in any case, we're back here. We're recording here on July 2nd. We're 24 hours thereabouts removed from just a ton of activity by Chris Drury and company with the New York Rangers, the retool on steroids, if you will. And we're going to get to all the moves. We're going to break them down. We're going to give you analysis, kind of react to your reaction as well. Because I've been paying attention. I've been going back and forth with a bunch of you on social media as well. People passionate about some of these moves. And adding to that, we'll backtrack too, because we didn't do a show after the draft for similar reasons. Just, there were too many stories to write. There was too much to do. And I just decided, you know what? I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to wait. Let's get through. Let's see what they do July 1st, and we'll just package it all together. So that's what we're going to do in today's Rink Rap. I also want to let you know that Pierre McGuire was going to join us today and really help break everything down. But he had another commitment at the time that we're recording. So Pierre is unavailable, but he will be with us either next week or more likely in 2 weeks. He'll join the show, and we will do a show again next week. I'll have another guest on, somebody to play tennis with, if you will, right? Volley back and forth, get somebody else's opinion in here, not just mine, and go through it that way. And then Pierre will be joining us again, either next week or in 2 weeks. And I also this is a programming note. So I'm going to get all this stuff out of the way before we dive in here. That on July 12th, up in Albany, it is the New York State Hockey Hall of Fame. And I'm going to be up there. And no, don't get excited, or don't even think for a moment that Cerny is an inductee into the New York State Hockey Hall of Fame. That is not happening. I can assure you that's not happening. But I'm going to be up there because a bunch of key former Rangers or people with Rangers ties are being inducted this year. And I wanted to go last year when Dave Maloney was inducted. The year before, Sam Rosen was inducted. Cool stuff. A bunch of Rangers, Islanders, U.S. Olympians every year get inducted into the New York State Hockey Hall of Fame, and reporters and broadcasters. It's a great thing. And so I wanted to go last year, but I'm going to go this year because former Rangers GM Neil Smith is going to be inducted. Certainly everybody knows that watches his podcast. He's a buddy of mine. Don Maloney, former Rangers forward, former assistant GM, former Islanders GM, currently working in the front office of the Calgary Flames. Donnie's going to be inducted this year. Nicky Patillo, Staten Island's own, he's going to be inducted as well. Steve Janaszak, former U.S. Olympian, backup goaltender to Jim Craig, he's going to be inducted as well this year. A couple former Islanders. I think Kenny Morrow is going in, or maybe he's in already. I know there's another former Islander that's going in as well. It's a big class, but I'm going to be recording the show up there. We'll either do it live. It's a late Sunday afternoon, so that might be a good time, maybe not a great time to do a live show. We'll see. We'll make that decision. But at worst, we're going to go up there and record the show on July 12th. And, hopefully some of you will be able to come on up as well and join it, support the New York State Hockey Hall of Fame and Neil Smith and Donnie Maloney and all that. So those are all programming notes. That's what lies ahead. And of course, in the big picture, there's a lot that lies ahead for the New York Rangers. But now, instead of so much speculation about what lies ahead for the Rangers, we actually have a lot of tangible things in front of us, right? So let's go back to last Friday. Let's go back to last May, or this past May, mid-May. I wrote a story at foreverblueshirts.com, something to the effect of, can the Rangers turn the Pavel Dorofeyev dream into a reality? And I documented there chapter and verse why this was the guy that, boy, if they could pull off somehow acquiring him this offseason, that's the guy I want, right? Yes, I wanted Jason Robertson too, and some people slammed me for that. Oh, give him $15 million a year, whatever. Similar guys, RFAs, the Rangers weren't in a position to offer sheet either one of them, right? Because they don't have their own second round pick next year. And to lure these guys away, Robertson and Dorofeyev, it was going to take a significant contract. So the compensation was going to include a first, a second, and a third round at minimum, right? And the Rangers didn't have their own second round pick. So that was, even back in mid-May, I knew that was the big rub of, well, you're not probably going to be able to offer sheet Pavel Dorofeyev. But, there was a trade possibility. At the end of it, really kind of the conclusion of that story was, boy, this would be great if they could turn this into a reality, but it's probably going to remain a dream. Vegas is up against the salary cap. Yeah, the Rangers can weaponize the fact that they're so far under the salary cap. They could afford to add Dorofeyev. But, would Vegas really trade him? Right? And Rangers can't offer sheet him. Could they really pull this off? And at the end of the day, I was like, well, it's probably more dream than reality. So what happens early in the first round of the draft on Friday night? But then word starts breaking. Rangers acquire Pavel Dorofeyev. Holy hell. Right? Yeah, I mean, this was the dream becoming a reality. He is such a good fit here. Okay? For many reasons. And to me, it was worth it. They gave up 2 first-round picks, including the number 26 overall pick this year. So 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick. Great trade. Okay? I do that any day of the week. I do that every day of the week. Okay? Every month, every day, every, I would do that. Dorofeyev fits perfectly here. And you can talk about stylistically and all that. Oh, who's he going to play with? And, who's going to set him up? Whatever. I get it. He's not a perfect player, but he's a really good fit. And you could argue perfect fit for them, for their retool and everything. It starts with the fact that he's 25 years old. So you're not signing a 30-year-old free agent. You're not signing 30-year-old Alex Tuck, for 7 years at $10.5 million a year, where you're going to be sweating out the final half of that contract, or maybe a little bit less of that. But let's say the final half of that contract, you're going to go, what are we doing here? Right. And the Rangers have been down that road so many times. That's not the case with Dorofeyev. He's 25. Led the Golden Knights in goals with 37 this past season, 35 2 years ago. So he's a two-time 30-goal scorer with a minimum 35 goals each of the past two seasons. And you can argue 25, he could just be scratching the surface of who he is. He hasn't peaked, right? He's hitting his prime. And you take it from there. So you got a guy that's probably getting better, a guy that had a terrific postseason. The knock was on him before was, he hasn't been great in the postseason. They scored 12 goals for Vegas this postseason. Big reason why they've reached the Stanley Cup final. They didn't win. They fell a little bit short against Carolina, but he's a big reason why they got there. So he's got that experience as well. And that drive, he's got that drive in the big games, right? But there's so much more to like about him. But it starts with the age. It starts with that they didn't have a pure finisher, maybe outside of Mika Zibanejad. They didn't really have a pure goal-scoring finisher on this roster. They didn't have it until they got Dorofeyev. So he fills a crater-sized hole. Now, and I'm jumping around a little bit here. I've seen some people say, well, okay, that's not a bad trade-off. You added Dorofeyev, you removed Trocheck, but really now, we created one hole and we filled another, whatever. We'll get to that. But to me, Dorofeyev isn't replacing Trocheck. I get that Trocheck has been moved out of the lineup now with his trade, and we'll certainly get to that. But to me, he's replacing Artemi Panarin, a crater-sized hole in your lineup since he was traded in February. So he's not the playmaker or the play driver that Panarin is. He's a different player, right? So, don't expect 70 assists out of Dorofeyev next season. He's a goal scorer, okay? Both at even strength and on the power play. He was second in the league with 20 power play goals last year. So a Rangers power play that was 5th overall in the league last season on the power play, right? And that's with Adam Fox missing 27 games and the power play kind of cratering when he was out of the lineup. If he can stay healthy, continue to run point there, now you add Dorofeyev. No disrespect, Trocheck not there in the top power play unit, but now you're putting Dorofeyev in. That's pretty frightening. That is scary. Him, Zibanejad, Fox, Lafreniere, Miller. That's pretty darn good. And we'll get to the second unit in a little bit later as we break things down here. But Dorofeyev gives them something that they really needed. Oh, and he's 25. And you know what? He's a responsible guy defensively too. He's a better defensive player, and he'll give you more effort defensively than Artemi Panarin for sure. Right? You can argue his skill set. He's not as good a play driver, whatever. Not as slippery and all that as Panarin, but he's better in his own zone. He's more defensive conscious as well, than Artemi Panarin. So, keep that in mind too. Rangers didn't acquire him to be Jan Eriksson. All right, let's get that straight. They got him to score a bucket full of goals, hopefully 40 plus a year for many, many seasons to come. But it doesn't suck that he can play defensively and is willing to do so and sacrifice a little bit. So you like that. So that's your start. Then you draft Alberts Šmits with the number 5 overall pick in the NHL draft. A lot of controversy there, right? Like you can see that the banner here under below says 2026 NHL Draft Live Reaction Show here. Well, that's an old banner. I don't know why it's here, but it is. Blame the production crew. But the live reaction was really mixed when the Rangers selected Šmits. And that's because Chase Reid had fallen down and was available at 5 overall. And on most draft boards, Chase Reid, the more offensive-minded, right-shot defenseman, was the popular pick to be gone before 5, to be the first defenseman off the board. Well, with San Jose's trading, and moving things around and adding the number 9 overall pick, they decided then to pivot. Well, we're not going to draft the defenseman, number 2 overall. We're going to take Ivar Stenberg, 2nd overall, the talented forward. So that kind of changed things a little bit. It also changed that in front of the Rangers at number 4, that the owner of that pick changed, right? So it wasn't as easy to predict after you got through the top 3 teams. Once, the Blackhawks moved that pick to Buffalo, number 4 overall, it was tough to predict. So what happens? I thought that there was a chance they might reach for a forward at 4, Buffalo. But if not, I thought they were going to go Chase Reid. They didn't. They went Daxon Rudolph. You talk about, maybe out of the top 5 defensemen in the draft, a lot of people would have had him 5th out of that group, but he might be the best overall offensive defenseman. Reid has more of a two-way game to him, and he's probably a little bit farther along in his development than Rudolph. So it was a surprise. But Ranger fans, again, we're going back to live reaction here. Man, did I get a mixed reaction, right? A lot of people were pissed off that the Rangers did not select Chase Reid. And you know what? In the big picture, maybe they're going to be right. Then there were others that were the exact opposite. Said, hey, listen, nothing against Reid, but Šmits is, a big, powerful man at age 18 already. A lot of scouts, a lot of draft experts think he's NHL ready right now. He's played against men. He excelled against men. He impressed in the Olympics playing for Latvia. World Juniors, he was a dominant player. World Championships, he more than held his own against men. He's 6'3", 205. Not that Reid's a tiny guy by any stretch of the imagination, but that Šmits gave you that physical element and is the probably most together and most further along as a defensive prospect of all the defensemen in that draft class, with probably Carson Karls right behind him. Right behind him. But again, I get the debate, and I originally said, hey, a lot to like about this pick. I mean, there's a lot to like about his Šmits, right? And I'm talking about big picture, not just, he might be NHL ready, might be able to, sign his entry-level contract this summer, maybe makes the roster out of training camp. I mean, all of that's well and good, but that's not what makes a successful pick in my book. It's the big picture, and we won't have these answers for years to come. Who would have been the better pick? Did the Rangers, select the right guy? But even if Chase Reid ends up being a better player, then you can argue, well, they made the wrong pick. They didn't make a bad pick, right? Like, this isn't a dicey pick. Like, there's not a single scout draft expert that I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot of them that know a lot more about the inner workings of the top prospects, here in the draft, or all the prospects in the draft, but certainly the top ones that we're talking about. Nobody doesn't believe. So nobody doesn't believe. That's kind of like a double negative. Double negative is a positive, meaning they all are in agreement that Šmits is going to be a really, really good foundational top 4 defensemen in the NHL. The flip side is I don't find anybody that tells me anything different about Chase Reid. Now, Reid projects to be the better offensive player. Šmits projects to be the better defensive player. Šmits left side, Reid on the right side. Yeah. Listen, I don't think they could have gone wrong either way. And I get the arguments. People have their favorites, looking ahead. Some fans are thinking, if you bring Reid in now, he goes to college, a couple years, he develops. Oh, that coincides perfectly with the end of Adam Fox's contract, right? Maybe Reid would have had the opportunity to play one season, maybe on the second power play unit and all that behind Adam Fox, and then replace him the next year, in theory. Okay. I get that argument. I think in a best case scenario, things are going well for the Rangers and Adam Fox re-ups and then he stays here. He's still playing at an elite level. I mean, we're talking about a guy that was, former Norris Trophy winner, a guy that was a point a game player pretty much last season for the Rangers. So, that would be a best case scenario is that, he's going to continue to play well and he'll continue to be running your power play and all that. But I get that argument, the Reid argument, how that fit there. But Šmits, big picture, left side, top 4, look at his timeline, right? Even if he doesn't play in the NHL this year, I'm not hung up on that, even though I know we use that a lot in our stories and our shaping who Šmits is, that he's NHL ready or the most NHL ready defense prospect from that draft class. All well and good. But in the bigger picture, right, he's going to get here sooner rather than later. I agree with that. He'll be making an impact probably before Reid would have made an impact here. Okay, whatever. But on the left side, as Gabrielov ages, I mean, Gabrielov is your number one, top line left side defenseman, for now and the foreseeable future. But if Šmits can marinate and learn from Gabrielov, marinate behind him, learn from Gabrielov once he's here in the NHL with the Rangers, perfect scenario. And Gabrielov still has, more years on his contract, than Fox. We use the Fox-Reid comparison. Well, now Gabrielov and Šmits. Gabrielov plays out, that contract, but at some point in how you envision the best case scenario, at some point, the kid learns from Gabrielov and they switch roles. And eventually Šmits is your top pair left side defenseman. Gabrielov, as he gets older, heads towards his mid-30s, he drops back as your number 2 defenseman, right? Or your second pair defenseman. It's not a bad place to be. Not a bad place to be for the Rangers. So that's the draft. Once you get past Šmits and get into the second round and all that, obviously I've seen some of these players. I saw Hrenko, play at the World Juniors, for example, the talented young center from Slovakia. There's a lot to be excited about with him. But again, I'm not going to profess to be a genius or an expert, about these kids. I can't give you chapter and verse on Charlie Morrison because, I haven't seen him play a lot. I've seen highlights. I certainly talked to a lot of people in the business, but I'm not going to lie and say, oh, Charlie Morrison, this and that, or, Bose, this and that, or, whatever on down the line. Hrenko, I've actually seen play a little bit, at least at the World Juniors. So I've, seen some games live and, certainly seen film on him and everything. And there's a lot to like. Great personality. Loved him at that development camp. But the one thing I don't want to do is give a grade to this draft class. I see it in other publications. I can't give a fair grade, and I don't think it's hard to even give a grade for years to come until you see who becomes what, right, out of your draft class. Who's a surprise, who's a disappointment, who's going to be a star, who's going to be an NHL player, who's going to be a minor league player, who you don't know yet. It's all projections. But I did see several of the draft grades for the Rangers were in the C. I saw some C- grades, and I'm talking about, the Athletic and reputable, outlets. Okay. Let's see though. Let's give them all the chance. Last year's draft class, they didn't have a first round pick, but Malcolm Spence, certainly moved along, in his development, got bigger, stronger, got great experience at the University of Michigan. He was their first pick and it was a second round pick. Played Final Four for Michigan, what have you. So he seems to be progressing nicely. The one thing, and before we get to the break here, the one thing to segue out of this with development camp taking place, the draft just happened, and the Rangers acquiring Cole Beaudoin in the Trocheck trade from Utah and adding him to a mix. He's going to turn pro this year. Adding him to a mix of Liam Greentree and Jacob Battaglia. All of a sudden, the Rangers having completely restocked their prospect pool, right? But it was so shallow before that this draft, Rangers made 9 picks. Schmitz is a top 5 pick. They turned their number 26 pick partially into Dorofeyev. You got to like some of the work Chris Drury's doing here and backfilling, with that prospect pool. When you see Liam Greentree at development camp, he's going to turn pro this fall. Battaglia, we touched on. Nathan Aspinall is a lower round Ranger draft pick, had an absolute breakout season in the Ontario Hockey League this past year. Let's see how it translates, to the pro game. But now you at least have some guys to start getting a little excited about, right? Because this, again, after Gabe Perreault and then maybe dropping down to, maybe a Drew Fortescue, maybe a Scott Morrow. Last year, there just wasn't a lot to get excited about. It seemed that the bloom was off the rose of Brennan Othman, if you will. Like, nobody was really excited about him anymore. Rangers ended up trading him. Noah Laba did graduate into the NHL, so that was a prospect that turned an NHL player that was feel good about. Adam Sikora at the end of the season, kind of pumping up the Rangers with his inspired bottom 6 play. But I like where the Rangers are now. They're backfilling and at a higher level too. Greentree, former first round pick. Beaudoin, former first round pick. Battaglia was a second round pick. They're backfilling here with some good young talent. And as Schmitz is in the mix, and again, closer to the NHL level. So I think there's a lot to feel good about. And I'll leave you with this as we hit the break, and then we'll come back and continue the thought. One thing I really like that the Rangers have done here is buy these prospects that we're talking about, Beaudoin, Greentree, Battaglia, Aspinall, even Schmitz. They've bought them some time with some of the other moves that they made. And we'll get to those moves from July 1st. And I'll explain that further, how they bought time for their prospects and how key that is moving forward in the big picture, if not for the 26-27 season as well. So we'll get to that. Thanks for tuning in to Rink Rap. Thanks for liking and subscribing. And we'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back to Rink Rap. I'm Jim Cerny. Thanks for tuning in. It is a really just packed show here, right? So many different topics to talk about. We talked about the Dorofeyev trade. We kind of went through the draft, touched on the prospects. That's where we left off. And I think the Rangers, one of the things that I haven't seen enough people touching on here that I think is really vital to what they've done in this, real whirlwind last 24 hours. And even before that, at the draft and previous trades and stuff, is that they are buying time for their prospects to get some experience, not to rush anybody. because that would be bad. You don't need to rush these young kids. So what they've done here is, and they started doing this the right way last season. Listen, they felt Noah Laba was ready. He came out of Colorado College, played, a few games at Hartford at the end of his collegiate season, had a great training camp. They gave him the opportunity. He earned it. And now he's a bottom six center for the New York Rangers. He's a given right now, heading into training camp. That's great. He took advantage of his opportunity, and the opportunities will be there for others too to grab spots in the lineup. But he wasn't forced. He wasn't pushed. Like, if he wasn't ready, he was going back to Hartford, to play whatever, 15, 16, 17, 18 minutes a night, right? Until he was ready. That's how they handled Gabe Perreault. Gabe Perreault was their top prospect a year ago at this time and heading into training camp last year. Some people were really disappointed that Perreault didn't make the opening night roster. But instead, Gabe Perreault went down to Hartford, played at an all-star level, was pretty much a point-a-game player, had 10 goals in 20 games, and I think the points were whatever they were, 18 points, 20 games, whatever. And then he came up to the NHL, and he still, you could argue, you'd be like, if the Rangers were a better team, Gabe Perreault wouldn't be here. He didn't quite look ready. But you could see bursts of that skill. You could see what he could be. And of course, down the stretch of the season after the Olympic break, he really found his groove. Confidence-wise, he really clicked with Zibanejad and Lafreniere. And you could see, oh yeah, okay, that's the kid. That's the top prospect. Yeah, here he comes. But they didn't force him into the spot. Okay? Even if, he probably was up a little bit sooner than he would have been if the Rangers were a true playoff contender last year. Okay. Well, he got that NHL experience, but he started in the minors. There was no forcing him. Okay. I like that. So now what they've done here in this offseason is Drew Fortescue, you've got an opportunity to earn a spot. I'm using him as the first example. There's a spot for you to play for in training camp. But you know what? We're not going to force you into it. If you're not ready, you go to Hartford. Start the season in Hartford. Play 20, 22 minutes a night at Hartford. That's great for your development. He's 21 years old. There's no reason to rush him. I think he showed good promise to be an NHL defenseman in his 9-game cameo at the end of last season, after, 3 years playing collegiately at Boston College. I think he showed a lot. I think he needs to develop as well, especially in his own end. He gets the puck out of there. He's pretty calm, cool, collected, but the underlying metrics and even the eye test showed you, he's a kid, he's turning the puck over. He's struggling in these defensive areas with his metrics. And again, the eye test. Doesn't mean he's a bad player. He's not going to be a good player. He won't be an NHL player. I think he will be. But the moves they made here afford him the opportunity, if he's not ready in training camp, doesn't prove overwhelmingly that he's ready to play in the NHL, he goes to Hartford. And he's your top pair left side defenseman. Great. And he's just one example. That's what the Rangers did here by acquiring Marcus Pettersson to be their legit second pair defenseman on the left side. Now, I spoke to a lot of people. My good buddy, Dan Kingerski from Pittsburgh Hockey Now, I texted him after the trade and I said, listen, I know Pettersson. I've got eyes. I know he's been a reliable, steady, physical, really good defensive defenseman in the NHL for the Penguins and the Canucks, even though last season was not a great season for Pettersson. But then again, he played for one of the worst teams in the NHL. In fact, the worst team in the NHL, the Vancouver Canucks. So, okay, I get it. He's not coming to a Stanley Cup juggernaut in the New York Rangers either. But he does have a track record here. And he has a good track record playing for Mike Sullivan. And so those are the things that I asked Dan. as we were texting back and forth. I said, what kind of relationship did he have with Sully? He said, Sully loved him. Sully loves this guy. Why? Because he's so reliable. What drives Sully crazy and will limit your opportunities is if he can't trust you and he can't rely on you. So go down the list of guys that he didn't trust last season that missed out on opportunities or didn't take advantage of their opportunities. A lot of them are younger players. Excuse me. Brennan Othman ended up getting traded. Brett Berard ended up getting traded. I'm sticking to the younger guys here. Earl Vakanainen was in the opening night lineup. Didn't play a lot after that. He trusted Matthew Robertson more. Robertson was more reliable than Earl Vakanainen. He loves Pettersson because he's reliable. And teammates love him. Apparently, the media there in Pittsburgh love him. His nickname was the Dragon because he's kind of tall, very tall. He's 6'5". He's kind of thin, long arms and legs, and he's a tough son of a bitch too. Anyway, so you add him, right, as second pair defenseman, and which is a role that he's played for years now. Pittsburgh and Vancouver, played it well. 30 years old. He's got a decent amount of NHL experience there. Because you got him, now you have two legitimate left side NHL defensemen, Gabrielov and Pettersson. You don't have to rush Fortescue. Again, if he's ready, and by ready, I mean, if you think he's your best option as a third pair left side defenseman to start the season, great. It'll be a great opportunity for him. He'll play with Braden Schneider. He'll slot in behind the other two. You can kind of shelter him. But, if you think he's ready, he's ready. No issues with that. But if he's not, okay, you covered the top four here. That means Matthew Robertson, who by and large is a third pair left side defenseman in the NHL. That's probably where he should slot in. But a guy who played quite a few second pair minutes in the second half of last season and wasn't terribly out of place, can be your third pair defenseman this year, or he battles it out with Vakanainen. So the Rangers also, this happened right as we began the podcast. We're recording it here on Thursday. They signed Dennis Cholowski. He's a guy that's got almost 200 NHL games of experience under his belt. He's 28. Kind of played more earlier in his career in the NHL with the Red Wings. Since then, he's been in AHL, NHL guy for the Islanders and the Devils the last couple of years. The Rangers probably signed him, to be the Connor Mackey type player. He's in the American Hockey League. He's got NHL experience. If you have injuries or you need somebody to be the seventh defenseman, okay, maybe Cholowski is that guy. But I think all things being equal, that third pair battle is going to be Schmitz, Fortescue, Robertson. And you talk about best case scenarios for the New York Rangers. You got your 18-year-old first round pick this year, your 21-year-old third round pick from 2023, Fortescue, and Robertson, who was a second round pick, took a while to develop, but was an NHL regular last season after 4 or 5 years, in the minors. That's a best case scenario. They are all the Ranger draft picks. These are all guys developed by the Rangers and slotted in not above their grade, but where they should be slotted in. To me, Robertson on a good NHL team is a third pair defenseman. And Fortescue and Schmitz at this point shouldn't be pushed into bigger roles past the third pair until they prove at the NHL level that they can play at a higher level. So the Pettersson trade is massive for the Rangers. And we heard them possibly talking about a Nikishin trade as well with Carolina. Obviously that didn't happen. But it was clear the Rangers wanted to get a second pair left shot defenseman, and they got it. And then that's great for their younger kids below them. And we'll see how it plays out. Don't have to rush Schmitz. Don't have to rush Fortescue. You've got cover there. So I like that, what the Rangers did. and it translates to the forward position too, right? If Liam Greentree, kicks down the door in training camp and forces his way onto the roster, amazing. If he's Noah Laba and you say, we can't start the season without this kid. He earned it. Great training camp. He's going to make a difference. Okay, great. Give him that opportunity in camp. But guess what? You don't have to rush him because the Rangers went, obviously you signed or traded for and then signed Dorofeyev. So great. But Greentree wasn't going to be at that level anyway. I'm just using him as an example. Like we used the Fortescue example. But then the Rangers signed Oliver Bjorkstrand, a middle six veteran guy, 11 years in the NHL, 6-time 20-goal scorer, coming off a season with the Tampa Bay Lightning. But you only signed him for a 1-year contract. Love it. Love that it's only 1 year. Now, you can argue if that was the right guy, $4.5 million a year. I tend to think it's a decent signing. Okay. Because it's one season. So Bjorkstrand is there for one season, and that allows Greentree and Aspinall and Beaudoin, and some of these other kids, Brody Lamb, and all these guys, even Sikora, maybe marinate some more, get minor league experience in Hartford. Great. By the way, total offshoot here. Like, I'm going to be fired up following the Hartford Wolfpack this season. Haven't felt that way in a while. Like, I was excited to watch, I'll admit, Perreault and Morrow and see if Othman was going to develop, in the minors last season. But I'm like genuinely fired up. Like, if Hartford opens their season and they've got the 3 OHL captains, I love that. I love that Greentree, Aspinall, and Beaudoin were all captains in the OHL and productive players in the OHL last season. I mean, if they play on the same line, I love it. If that's how it works out, it may not be. Maybe they split the guys up. But if Beaudoin is between Greentree and Aspinall, bring it. I want to watch these games. I want to see this, right? So yeah, Hartford's going to be a must visit, I think, for Ranger fans this season. And whether you watch games on AHL TV or however you consume it and get to see these guys, or just follow it through us, we'll be certainly covering it for Forever Blueshirts. They're going to be fun to watch. But you bought yourself some time here by getting a Bjorkstrand, middle six player. You don't have to rush anybody here because that's a mistake. And the Rangers could have been caught up in that. So here, Chris Drury has backfilled the prospect pool a little bit. Certainly a better look. But, there's no rush getting those guys to the NHL. You're not forced to do that. And you know what? Let's say somebody is really tearing it up in the A. Aspinall, Greentree, pick your guy. Sikora, whatever, pick your guy. Bjorkstrand is going to have value to a cup contender, right? Or to a playoff contender ahead of the trade deadline. So I know he's got some trade protection, but you could move him at that point. But you didn't go into camp saying, God, we really need one of these kids to make the team. That would be a mistake. And they covered themselves there. So Rangers have cover. So good job there. The Trocheck trade. So listen, I love Vincent Trocheck. You know that if you're here. If you come watch this show often. I love him. I think he was a great Ranger. I think he is one of the great free agent signings in Rangers history. Right? Outside of Artemi Panarin, Adam Graves. Well, I guess they did. They also signed Wayne Gretzky as a free agent. So, hard to leave Gretzky off that. But Gretzky was at the end of his career. So I don't even include him in this. Really, outside of Graves and Panarin, in recent memory at least, is there a free agent that delivered on his contract, that overperformed his contract, like Vincent Trocheck? 21 minutes a night, heart and soul player, two-way centerman, killer in the face-off circle, one of the best face-off men in the NHL, clutch player, clutch playoff goals that he scored for this organization. Again, heart and soul, right? Like, he just bled for the team. That type player. Combination of heart and soul and skill. Love Vincent Trocheck. But as you know, if you've been watching the show, I got it. I was in on moving him if they made the right trade. I'm not saying this is a killer trade that they made. I was a little bit surprised about the return, but I do like the fact that they get 2 years of Sean Durzi to, again, bolster that second defense pair and bolster it with a guy that moves the puck as well as he does. He's more of an offensive defenseman. You know, the guy he replaces, Will Borgen, went on to Boston. Borgen was a stay-at-home, block shots, physical guy. Okay. That's great, but he wasn't great and his metrics weren't great in his own end defensively or getting the puck out of his own end, either skating it out or passing it out. That was not a strength of his. It will be for Sean Durzi. It is for Sean Durzi. Now, Durzi has to remain healthy. Borgen has always been a guy that's been healthy. I know he was banged up a little bit last year, but he still didn't miss a lot of games, right? He played through a lot of stuff last season. Durzi, has played only 90 games the past 2 seasons. He did play 60 last year with Utah. But, he is a good puck mover. He is a power play guy. He's got experience on the power play. So now, if Adam Fox gets hurt, you're not sweating it out. We're not going 5 forwards on the power play. We're not too scared to put Scott Morrow in to run the power play. We're not going to cringe because Braden Schneider's there underperforming on the power play. No, now you've got a legit offensive defenseman in Sean Durzi. I'm not saying he's a superstar. I'm not saying he's a star. But with Fox healthy, running power play 1, now you got Durzi running power play 2. I like that. And obviously, this is something that the coach said publicly that he wanted. So kind of puts a little heat on the GM to deliver. Mike Sullivan said, we need more puck moving defensemen. It was an indictment on Braden Schneider, maybe a little bit on Scott Morrow as well. And certainly the guys on the left side. Outside of Adam Fox, who do we have to move the puck quickly up and out of the zone? 5-on-5. And who can help out on the power play on the second unit? Sean Durzi's that guy. He was a 41-point player a few years ago. That's pretty nice. And he's been accustomed to being, like Pettersson, has been accustomed to being a second pair defenseman. Pettersson, more of a stay-at-home guy, also pretty adept at getting the puck out of his own end. But Pettersson, more of a stay-at-home guy on the left side, paired with the more offensive-minded Durzi. Now, Durzi is not a great defensive defenseman, okay? But he does move the puck well and should help the Rangers' transition game, hopefully be another option for them not to get stuck, in their own end. So again, getting him means that you don't have to force feed a Scott Morrow into the lineup, right? Not that I think that that's what the Rangers were going to do anyway, but Morrow can continue to grow. Like how they didn't rush Matthew Robertson, they don't need to rush Scott Morrow. Until he's ready. And maybe Morrow ends up just being a trade chip somewhere along the line. It looks like now the other guy that's really affected here by the Durzi acquisition is Braden Schneider. It looks like Braden Schneider is here to stay, at least maybe on a bridge deal. He's still 2 years away from unrestricted free agency, but in that familiar third pairing role. If you're Schneider, you're probably not too psyched about that. If you're the Rangers, you're a deeper team if Braden Schneider is on your third pair. If it's whoever, Schneider Robertson, Schneider Schmitz, Schneider Fortescue, you're a deeper team if that's your third pair, because now you have a reliable top 4. So we'll see. Schneider still needs a contract. I know the Rangers qualified him earlier in the week. But I like how that breaks down. Braden Schneider may not be happy with how this breaks down. If he heard Will Borgen was being traded, he might have been excited. All right, they're moving me up. Well, no, I don't see that being the case. So, maybe there's still a Schneider trade to be made. I don't think that's what the Rangers are going to do. But we'll see. Listen, Chris Drury has surprised us with a couple of these moves already. And then who's the seventh defenseman right now? As you look at their roster, we could debate that. It kind of depends on how the left side shakes out. But a Vakanainen or a Robertson or Vincent Iorio, these are capable seventh defensemen in the NHL options. So the Rangers, it's shaping up there. Is the Rangers roster right now better than it was in game 82 last season? Better than it was when Chris Drury put out the retool letter, the letter to the fans in January? Are they better right now at the NHL level? It's a good debate because, effectively they have not replaced Vincent Trocheck. So what happens here is, Mika Zibanejad, JT Miller, your top two forwards. Noah Laba is a third, a 3C now. And of course, Joe Veleno, is signed as a free agent. Again, I like it. 1-year deal. Now he's not an old guy, but he's been a disappointment for much of his NHL career. He had some pretty good junior numbers. They have not translated. It has not translated for him at the NHL level offensively, but he provides speed. He played for Montreal in the bottom six last year. He's played for Detroit before that. We'll see. Everybody seems to want to take a chance on Veleno, right? They see there's the raw skill. They see that there's the speed. But what did he have last year? 2 goals in 60 games or whatever it was with Montreal. It didn't translate. It hasn't translated. He scored double-digit goals once in his career so far. But it's a 1-year contract. And again, I like the speed factor. Your speed down the middle in your bottom six is pretty good right now with Noah Laba and Joe Veleno. Okay. But are the Rangers, at the NHL level right now, are they better than they were when last season ended? So I think they're better than they were when the season ended last year. But if you take it back to the letter, right? Take it back to Drury's letter in January. Are they an overall better team? Remember, they had Trocheck and Panarin then. Their second pair defense was Soucy and Borgen. Fortescue hadn't come to the NHL yet. Šmits hadn't been drafted yet. So Dorofeyev is in there. Kind of swaps out with Panarin. So debate it. You got, 9 years younger or whatever there. But, he's not the play driver that, Panarin is. We don't know where, who he's going to, build chemistry with the Rangers. But, I love the move. But just playing devil's advocate, right this second, are the Rangers better? Okay. Let's say that's a swap. You swap those two. Veleno for Carrick. Remember how good Sam Carrick was as that 4C. Really good. Veteran guy, tough, but certainly not the skater Veleno is. So again, debate that. Nobody's really replaced Trocheck because Laba was here last season. Now he might get a little bit more of an elevated role. This keeps JT in the middle and Mika, either one could have played on the wing. JT did play some on the wing. He took a lot of faceoffs, but then would also play on the wing, when need be. So they didn't really replace Trocheck. That's the big kind of X factor here. Now, listen, their second pair defense, I think, is much better. So their top 4 of their defense, assuming, Fox, everybody stays healthy, is better than it was when the letter went out. Now, this is better than Soucy and Borgen. Rather have Pettersson and Durzi. And then, Schneider, down in his third pair role, not in the second pair, certainly not on the top pair, where he struggled filling in for Fox last year. So are they better? That's the question right now. And I think it's a legit debate. I don't think it's a slam dunk. I think in the bigger picture, with the kids that they've gotten in some of these trades and seeing how they develop and letting them develop and everything, you can argue they're better organizationally. But we'll see at the NHL level. Injuries going to be, health is going to be a big part of this here. Big reason why that the collapse last season, I mean, the massive collapse. Like, again, Rangers were struggling, didn't think that they were going to make the playoffs anyway. But when you lost Fox and Shesterkin, it all crumbled. Oh, that gets to the goaltending, doesn't it? I mentioned Shesterkin and the backup plan. Let's get to that. We'll take a quick break here on Rink Rap. We'll come back. We'll wrap everything up, but we get to the goaltending because I know, and you have reason to be, that a lot of you, most of you, maybe even all of you, are pretty pissed off about another trade that the Rangers made on July 1st. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Rink Rap. I'm Jim Cerny. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for liking. Thanks for subscribing. Really, thanks for, really consuming our content at foreverblueshirts.com. Last weekend, leading up to the draft, you really consumed our pre-draft coverage, then our draft tracker and all our drafts, post-draft stories. Then we flipped it, to free agency and the trades, and we did a draft tracker and a trade tracker, everything that we've done in our feature stories. You have really been consuming at a serious level. So we really appreciate that. That's what keeps the lights on, so to speak, for Forever Blue Shirts and for the Rink Rap podcast. So appreciate you doing that, for hopping on board, really being supportive. Again, as I mentioned, next week we're going to be back with the show, talk more Rangers, kind of debate, after we kind of let things settle here, debate where the Rangers are, where they're going. Make sure to have a special guest next week. Pierre McGuire promised us either next week or the following week he'll join us. Then we'll also record the show, as I talked about, on July 12th up at the New York State Hockey Hall of Fame. We're going to be later in the month. We're going to be at the Shoulder Check Showcase at Sacred Heart University. A bunch of former Rangers. Chris Kreider is going to be there, and current Rangers as well. Adam Fox will be there. Matt Rempe will be there. So, there's a lot to look forward to here in the month of July. We're not going anywhere during the summer. The podcast keeps coming every week, and certainly our coverage on Forever Blue Shirts, is every day, multiple stories every day. So that's what's going on. That's what's to look forward to. But in the previous segment, I left with the goaltending battle. No, nobody's coming here for Igor Shesterkin's job. He's the guy, right? But what we learned this past season is if Igor gets hurt, you better have a really good plan B. Because Jonathan Quick at age 40 was good when he was playing, once every week and a half. Igor play, get Jonathan Quick a start. He more than held his own, certainly was a great locker room presence, leader, Stanley Cup champion, all that, future Hall of Famer. But when he was asked to play more than once every week and a half, he wasn't the same Jonathan Quick. Listen, team sucked in front of him too. It was a defensive mess, especially when Fox was also out with Shesterkin. But Jonathan Quick was no longer a real viable number 2 goalie that you could trust in the NHL. And it's hard to say that, but that was the case. You saw it with your own eyes. The metrics back it up as well. When he was forced to play 2-3 games a week, he was not the same guy. Spencer Martin then gets called up from the minors. We debated that. I was like, here's Dylan Garand's chance, right? Let's get Dylan Garand in there. They didn't. They brought in Spencer Martin. He was overwhelmed. He should be your 4th option, not the next option after Shesterkin goes down and Quick needs somebody to back him up. Anyway, we all know how that played out. Dylan Garand came up at the end of the season, played really well, got 3 starts, was terrific. It was one of the 3 starts, and 2 of those 3 starts, he won 2 of them, lost the other one in overtime or shootout. He was so good, was Dylan Garand, right? But it was only 3 games. Now, he has some pedigree, obviously. He's the guy the Rangers have been grooming for a number of years now. He was an AHL All-Star 2 seasons ago. But for the most part, he wasn't great last season in Hartford. So clearly the Rangers still have some reservations. I think they're excited about him, but they weren't going to hand him anything this offseason heading into training camp. And I was a proponent of that. Again, if you read my stories, if you follow here, if you watch the podcast, you know where I stood on it. I was hopeful that Dylan Garand could be Igor's backup next season. I was excited about that. And I know the fans are too, right? They want the homegrown kid who played well in his first 3 NHL games. They want him to succeed. They want him to be Igor's backup. I'm down with that. But I thought the Rangers should go out and sign a veteran goalie, somebody with NHL experience. I didn't think you could just hand it to him. I thought there should be some competition. And then, hopefully Garand, Garand, earns the spot, and that goalie, whoever it is, right? We talked about Phoenix Copley, we talked about Pettersson, Halverson, all these guys that are more AHL goalies now, but have some NHL experience. But the Rangers instead swing a trade for Joonas Korpisalo. Yeah, it's got $4 million, $8 million left on his contract that runs 2 more seasons. 32 years old, played over 300 NHL games. Now, his salary cap hit is only $3 million because Ottawa is paying $1 million of that from 2 trades ago when Ottawa sent him to Boston. Boston sends him to the Rangers. Okay, those are the logistics. It is not an exciting pickup here. And the writing seems to be on the wall. We'll see what Chris Drury says when he speaks to the media, if he speaks to the media. We'll see what he says here. But the writing seems to be on the wall. You're not going to get Joonas Korpisalo, who's Jeremy Swayman's backup the past 2 seasons and, has been in that role for years in the NHL, former number 1, too, as well. You're not going to pay him $3 million to play down in Hartford, right? That's why I was talking about NHL guy, NHL experience, but better than Spencer Martin, but maybe not Joonas Korpisalo. Like, the writing seems to be on the wall that, like, Garand really would have to crush it in the preseason training camp, and Korpisalo would have to face plant in a massive way for the Rangers to head into opening night without Korpisalo as Igor's backup, right? Certainly appears that way. Seems how that's set up. So it was a curious trade to me. And now, Garand is not waiver exempt either. I'm not saying that their team's lined up to grab Dylan Garand if he goes through waivers, but I'd say based on how he played at the end of last season, his contract, right? He's only making, what's his average now? 8.75 or something like that. Right? He could be a target. If somebody has a goalie that gets injured in camp and the Rangers are trying to slip him through waivers, unless the Rangers, I don't know. I can't imagine. I'm not even going to say that unless, I can't imagine Korpisalo comes here, right, and is going to be good with, okay, there's competition. The kid beat me out. Now I got to go to Hartford. Yeah. Rangers are going to pay $3 million to a guy to play in Hartford, one, and that guy, who absolutely considers himself an NHL goalie, is just going to accept it. Like, it just doesn't feel like a good fit. Maybe there's something I don't know here, Maybe there have been other conversations that have been had behind the scenes with Korpisalo or Garand or whatever that I don't know about, that I'm not privy to. But just taking it on the surface, and I know Ranger fans are pissed about this. They wanted Garand to get this opportunity. Is he going to get an actual opportunity? Is there a real competition in the fall? That's a question that Chris Drury needs to honestly answer, again, when and if he meets with reporters. Quick final thought on Cole Beaudoin. I know we mentioned his name a couple times here. He comes over in that Vinny Trocheck trade along with the Durzi and a 3rd-round pick, and he's a real intriguing guy. Now, he's not a star center in the fact that, he's going to be a top line or top 6 guy in the middle, for years to come. So my phone's going off here. That's not him. He's a 2-way guy. Right now, projects as a middle 6 center. Could play on the wing. Could end up on the wing too. Really good penalty killer. Great intangibles. High character guy. Physical. Big. Strong. Did score 33 goals. Have 80 points last year with Barrie. Another captain in the Ontario Hockey League. It's got him, Greentree, and Aspinall were all captains last year. Love that. But he's a high character guy for sure. He is going to be an NHL player. Like I feel confident in saying that from everybody I've spoken to and, things I've read and watched about him over the years. He's going to be an NHL player. And you know what? Probably a winning player on a winning team. He's that type guy. You win with guys like Cole Beaudoin. The questions here are, what level of player is he going to be? Right? Is he going to produce enough offensively to be a top 6 center? Or is he going to be in that, middle 6 role, maybe be a really good 3rd-line center? And listen, that's not a bad thing. Look at Anton Lundell with the Florida Panthers, right? Now, though you could argue that he should be playing for another team, he'd probably play higher up. But okay, you win championships with guys like Anton Lundell. And I'm not saying it's apples to apples, Lundell and Beaudoin here. But you win championships with a really good, high character, 2-way centerman like him. So let him marinate. He's going to be in the minors to turn pro this year. Let him grow. Let's see what he's got. Let's make sure he's healthy too. He sustained an injury at the end of last year. He was crushing it in the playoffs for Barrie. Barrie ended up getting to the OHL final. A championship round. But he got hurt. And from what I know, or what I hear at least, it was fairly significant injury. So where's his health at now? How does it impact this coming season? Again, there's no rush to get him to the NHL, but, is it impacting his training this off season? Is it going to impact the start to his regular season next year, training camp, any of that? Again, those are things that Chris Drury will have to address. But, it's a little bit of a concern. Obviously, the Rangers signed off. They made this trade. Their medical people have to be okay with where Beaudoin is and where he's going to go with that injury. So, we'll take him at the word there. This is a guy you don't want not to be healthy, right? You don't want that for any of your players. But he's such a big physical guy, though. And he leads with that physical game. So you want him to be 100%, and you want to know that he's going to be a guy that stays healthy for the long haul. Anyway, so a couple thoughts on Cole Beaudoin, a couple questions on Cole Beaudoin. I think a lot to be excited about, for the New York Rangers. Their development camp is finishing up this week. Got to see some of the kids from the draft. Got to see, Liam Greentree for the first time, in his wearing a Rangers sweater. Drew Fortescue showed up. He probably didn't need to come to development camp, but he came. I like that. EJ Emery was there. Big season for him coming up. There are going to be high expectations, for that program at North Dakota. Verhoff and Carl's now joined that defense core there. With North Dakota, they were a Final Four team last year. They have national championship aspirations. And on top of that, EJ Emery, it's going to be his 3rd season collegiately, needs to take that next step here. So just kind of wrapping up development camp thoughts and all that. So thanks for joining us here on Rink Rap this week. I think we covered a lot of ground. Thanks for hanging out with me. Certainly keep sending me messages, on social media, and I'll try and get your thoughts and work them into, the future podcasts. And we'll be back next week see if the Rangers are done wheeling and dealing, or if Chris Drury, addresses the media before then, and we can kind of dissect everything that he said, where the Rangers are at, where they're going, and we'll make sure to have a special guest or two in the next coming weeks, as we laid out for you before. So again, thanks for joining us. Get fired up, Rangers fans. I know it's July. I know it's hot and everything, but it's all about the hockey. It is all about the hockey and getting us set for training camp in September. And we'll have more of that next week on Rink Rap. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next week. Cheers.